Tim Rood. That's my wife Lucky in the back there, also my AV technician. And we've lived in Piedmont for 9 years now. And one of the reasons we moved here was the wonderful schools. And another reason we moved here was the walkability of our neighborhood. We live on Lower Wildwood, not far from Grand Avenue. And, you know, one of our favorite things to do with our kids after dinner is say, why don't you guys just, here's $5, go down to the corner store and get yourself some ice cream. These are all pictures taken in Piedmont, and they are all of elements of neighborhood sustainability that we already have. And I'm just going to kind of run through some of these. Broadly put, density is just putting stuff closer together. So we talk about the 3 Ds. Density is the first one, diversity and design. So in terms of diversity, this basically just means mixing up a little bit. Having a mix of different land uses allows there to be something nearby that you might want to walk to. Putting a lot of houses together with nothing else, you know, okay, maybe you can walk to your neighbors and your trip is a little shorter, but it's going to be more useful if you can walk to the video store or go get an ice cream or walk to school or things like that. You can fulfill some of your daily needs without having to get into a car. It also makes the streets safer because there tends to be more activity throughout the day and evening, more people around, more eyes on the street. And more opportunity to walk or bike to nearby destinations. This is showing a lot of additional destinations like dog parks, skate park, playgrounds, schools, tennis courts, you know, neighborhood destinations that people walk to all the time. It even has the casual carpool pickups. That's what that little car is right there, where you can catch a ride with a friendly stranger. So in terms of neighborhood design then, there are a bunch of things that have been shown statistically to make people more likely to walk and bike and use transit within their neighborhood. Smaller blocks are one of them. And Professor Southworth was too modest to mention it, but he has a wonderful book called Streets and the Shaping of Towns and Cities, which really looks at kind of the morphology of street and block patterns and how they've changed over time. And basically what has tended to happen is that blocks have gotten bigger and bigger. And we've gotten into this kind of pattern where there's only one way to get anywhere. You come out of your cul-de-sac onto a bigger street that leads to an even bigger street that leads to an even bigger street, you know, go a little ways down the road and then repeat the thing in reverse. Whereas in older neighborhoods, you had a much finer grain pattern with a lot more interconnectivity, so you had multiple options of different ways to get places. As streets became fewer, they became wider. And we're all familiar with the 8 and 10 lane arterials that you see in a place like Orange County. You know, because Oakland and Piedmont are older than that, our streets never got that big, and there isn't now room to widen them to that extent. So, you know, but even in Piedmont, I'll show you that in a minute, there we have some streets that are remarkably wide for the level of traffic that they carry. The design of buildings and how they relate to the street is a huge part of what makes a neighborhood walkable or not. And of course, we have beautiful homes all over Piedmont, built in the era when, you know, a grand home had a grand front porch and a grand set of stairs and a grand landing at the bottom, and really had a whole gradation of, you know, public to semi-public to private to or semi-private to private space that really kind of created this very rich and detailed public realm. And we also, of course, have wonderful street trees that create shade and capture rainwater. And then there's kind of another level of things that we have that make Piedmont walkable that you might have to look a little harder to see. We have alleys, not on every block, but we have a lot of blocks that had alleys, and that allows all those garages to be moved up out of public view. And also we have very small garages that nobody wants to park their car in, so that discourages people from driving as well, I guess. We also have a lot of rear garages, so you have might be a 2-car garage back there, but you have a single driveway, which means that there's less interruption of the sidewalk with driveways and curb cuts. And these are all things that are kind of coming back now. There's a whole movement called traditional neighborhood design that is kind of taking off, where they're going back to alleys, going back to those long side driveways and garages placed at the back of the lot, all to make more walkable, pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods. Okay, and just to close, streets. really, streets are probably our biggest opportunity to make more sustainable neighborhoods in Piedmont. And for streets to be sustainable, they have to be what we call multimodal, which means they need to work for walkers, bikers, people on transit, cars, trucks, what am I forgetting? Skateboarders, we have a lot of those here in Piedmont, scooters, rollerbladers, you know, they need to work for everybody. Because they are really our public realm. They are where our community comes together. They're the glue that links our homes together into neighborhoods. And they also have an important ecological function. So, this is the general plan map of our road hierarchy. So here's the 13 up here. You have arterial streets, our highest traffic capacity streets, basically Grand, Oakland, Highland, and Moraga. Then the purple streets are minor collector streets. The yellow streets are major collector streets, and everything else is a local street. So that's, you know, what I experience. We live right there. What I find is that Wildwood and Magnolia, because a lot of traffic funnels into them and there's kind of no way across the canyon there, people tend to really pick up speed. Despite how unbelievably windy it is, they are determined to get out of there and get to work in the morning as fast as they can. They seem less in a hurry to get home at night for some reason. I don't know why, it's such a wonderful place to be. And then we also have these wonderful footpaths. And this is the only map I've been able to find of Piedmont's footpaths, but there are a bunch of them all over town, and they were, again, from the streetcar era to help people walk more easily to and from their streetcar stop, to cut down on the trip. And some of them are stairways because there was, you know, a grade change, you know, to help make the network more connected and give people better access to nearby destinations. And then we have bike routes, or actually in Piedmont we don't have bike routes. Piedmont has no designated bicycle routes. This is a map that appears in our general plan, and basically what it is Piedmont bike routes depicted in Oakland's bicycle plan. And as a planner who does a lot of transportation work, I find that a little embarrassing. I think there are things we could do. You know, designating a bicycle route doesn't mean you have to redesign the street. It can mean you know, state in a plan document that it is a bicycle route, and that means when you're making spending or paving decisions, you take that into account. Maybe you put some signs up at some point. There are grants that you can get to do that. Oakland has done it to help people navigate their way around the system, so that when they head up LaSalle, they don't have to wonder whether they're going to make a wrong turn and, you know, end up somewhere they didn't want to be. But no, I know that Montclair is 0.4 miles that way, you know. And then this is a Google Maps bicycling map that again shows those routes, and it's a little washed out. And you know, it also gives you a sense of our challenging topography. We basically have sort of a ridge that curves around like here. So we have our density down in this area, and our, of course, lower density hillside neighborhoods wrapping around that way. So getting people, you know, across that topography is a real challenge. So back to our road hierarchy map. So I thought this was fascinating. So these are the streets that we're calling, you know, more important. These are the ones that we expect to carry a higher volume of traffic. You know, the blue ones are important evacuation routes. For safety reasons, if we're going to spend money to put utilities underground, streets like Moraga are where we would want to do that, because that's how we get emergency vehicles in and out in an event. And then this map is showing you where the streets are the widest. So the purple streets here are over 35 feet wide, and if you go back and forth, you see that many of those are actually local streets. And they're not serving any regional function. You know, Bonita, west of Highland, it just happens to be very wide. So that creates some opportunities. That's room that's currently pavement that doesn't need to be that wide to carry the volume of traffic that it carries and provide the access to residents that it provides. So it creates some interesting possibilities. This is Hampton near Seaview. This is one of these over 35-mile-an-hour streets. It is a bus route at certain times of day, but it is, I didn't measure it, but it's got to be, what would you say, 60-foot pavement. And so here's this poor lonely cyclist, kind of dwarfed by this massive road. Grand Avenue also has a very wide pavement, particularly between the Shell Station and the Ace Hardware. It's a bit of a no man's land. And then when it gets into the residential section, it goes down to just a mere 4 lanes, but that's still quite a lot. Lakeshore used to have 4 lanes, and a few years ago they put it on what's called a road diet, and took it to a 3-lane section where you have a through lane each way and then a center lane that works for turns in both directions, because the turns are really what cause traffic to back up, and they made room for bike lanes in the process. So I would love to know whether that's something that we could consider for Grand Avenue, which is kind of an important link in our biking network. It provides access to Rockridge. We have bike lanes on the upper part of it. In the other direction, it goes to the Grand Lake area, to Lake Merritt, and to downtown. It's really the only flat way to downtown Oakland. It's an important connector route. And I would love to know if there's anything we could do to make it more bikeable. I have trouble with my kids when they first learn how to ride a bike, because we live on a busy street, and our busy street leads to an even busier street. So even though we have things nearby, it's, I'm not necessarily comfortable sending an 8-year-old out on herself to try to navigate down Grand Avenue. So in terms of excess pavement and what you can do with it, here's an example from Piedmont. This is Indian Road and Hampton. And this used to just all be pavement. And then about, 3 or 4 years ago, they put in an island and planted it, and that just kind of broke up the street, provided some additional permeable surface, created an amenity that's attractive whether you're walking or biking or driving past it or just looking out your window at it. And that's the kind of thing that I think we have opportunities to do more of. As Susan mentioned, we did a plan for the city and county of San Francisco called the Better Streets Plan. That's basically a manual for street design to try to take this into account and bring best practices in sustainable street design to San Francisco, make greener streets that are water and resource efficient, with hardy plants that can survive cold and fog and don't need a lot of water. This is the kind of street that, I don't know about you, but that we moved out of San Francisco to not live on anymore. We used to live out by City College, and it was cold. And with appropriate planting that's appropriate to the climate, you can really create a very different type of environment that's much more inviting and ultimately much more sustainable. And in commercial districts like south of Market, again, a more balanced approach to the pavement. You'll notice here we're bringing a curb out, making room for shelters so that people waiting for the bus are out of the rain and the elements. People with wheelchairs can get in and out. Pedestrians have more room to stroll. Bikers have a bike lane where they're out of traffic. And we have trees to shade the pavement, additional planting areas, just a more multimodal and a more livable street. Dealing with stormwater responsibly is an important part of that. So you can use plants to capture and purify stormwater and retain it before it goes on its way. And again, there's a whole slew of techniques that you can use to create inviting places that are part of streets. In the Bayview District, a typical residential street and what it could be. And then we did a computer model to kind of show how all the different users of that street can get in and out of there and coexist peacefully in a calmer environment. So I want to close with this image. This is a block away from my house. This is Magnolia. That's Nova. Nova has a nice traffic circle there that really provides a focal point for the neighborhood. And Magnolia, where it becomes Wildwood, has a lot of pavement. So my challenge to you is, what could we do there?
Thank you, Tim.
You bet. Thank you.